Is it? uh, Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chandini Jaswal. We've gathered here today to witness the first guest lecture in our Architecture in India Karwaan Heritage workshop dedicated to understanding the architecture of India. We're very, very delighted to be joined today by Dr. Jutta Jain-Neubauer, who studied Indology and Indian art history at the South Asia Institute of the University of Heidelberg in Germany and University of Bonn, also in Germany, where she obtained her PhD degree with a thesis on Stepwells of Gujarat in art historical perspective. With a fellowship of the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation, she studied the ancient canonical texts on art and architecture of India, Shilpa Shastras. She's worked for various institutions in India, such as the National Museum Institute for Art, History, Museology, and Conservation, the Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage, INTAC, for whom she has done the first ever full fledged documentation of Rani-Ni-Vav, the famous stepwell of the Queen in Patan, recently declared a UNESCO World Heritage site. She's currently Alexander von Humboldt Research Fellow affiliated to JNU, that is Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. Uh, we're very, very honored to have Dr. Jutta Jain join us for a lecture. I think ma'am's facing some technical errors, ladies and gentlemen. Just give me a second, I'll check with her because I think we've suddenly lost connection with her. Just a second. Uh, uh, Ladies and gentlemen, we are getting in touch with Dr. Jain. There seems to be some problem with her connection. We're getting in touch with her. Till then, we'll wait for another 5-6 minutes for ma'am to respond. Srishti is going to take over in the meanwhile whilst I try establishing connection with
Yeah, I
Dr.
hope
Jain again.
yeah, sure. Okay, Chandni, you can check with ma'am. Okay. So, uh, thank you so much. It's just, I think we were having this tech check with her, and then suddenly she lost her connection. So, uh, I hope you all have got the images that I have sent in the group, right? So, actually, that was the technically that was the last lecture that that you all have with me. I'll try.
We now invite Dr. Netlbauer to please begin with her lecture on the stepwells of Gujarat and Rajasthan. Over to you, ma'am. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, let me thank you, Ms. Chandini Jaswal, and everybody, all your colleagues at Karwaan Heritage, to be here today and talk to you about my lifelong engagement with water and stepwells and other water monuments, water architecture in India. I think it's a very good idea what you have initiated to introduce students and other people who are interested into various aspects of Indian art and architecture. But let us not talk too much about other things, but I'm really happy to share my research, my lifelong engagement, as I said, on the stepwells with you. My first field work was in Gujarat many years ago, as you can imagine. During my studies of Indian art history, I was intrigued that most of the academic writing on Indian art concentrated on the history and architecture of temples, of mosques, of palaces, and what is called high or classical architecture. But I felt that equally important are the expressions of the common people, of civic architecture and structures of everyday life. So I embarked on exploring the monuments connected with water, traveling all over Gujarat and other parts of Western India and Central India and also Rajasthan, visiting and documenting wells, stepwells, ponds, and other types of water monuments. This study resulted, as Chandni already said, in my book, The Stepwells of Gujarat, the first ever monograph on the subject, which deals with the architecture typologies, hydrotechnical knowledge, the iconographies of sculptures found in water structures, the chronology, and the histories and cultural siting of these unique monuments. The water structures that I will be talking about in a moment from now, often hydrotechnical and artistic.
Is Dr.
No, no.
Netbone, yeah, not audible to anybody, right?
Yeah, she's closing for everyone.
Uh, I think I'll talk to ma'am that we get the lecture rescheduled, right? I think there's some technical error that we keep running into. We'll just try again. So sorry everybody for the continued problems. We'll just work with ma'am.
Chandni, just one suggestion.
Hanji.
If you can get the presentation from ma'am and run it from your end, that becomes a little easier actually, a lot of times.
Yeah, you may have to, Chandni, you may have to take her through the process of uploading it on a Google Drive and sending you the
Yeah.
link.
Actually,
You
the
may have to.
problem Tanmay with scholar. एक मिनट मैं पहले mute कर ले. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another lecture at Karwaan Heritage. We're delighted to begin with Architecture in India, an architecture history workshop here at Karwaan Heritage. And for the first guest lecture, we have Dr. Jutta Jain-Neubauer. She studied Indology and Indian art history at the South Asia Institute of the University of Heidelberg, Germany, and University of Bonn, also in Germany, where she obtained her PhD degree with a thesis on stepwells of Gujarat in art historical perspective in 1978. With a fellowship of the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation, she studied the ancient canonical texts on art and architecture of India, Shilpa Shastras. She worked for various institutions in India, such as the National Museum Institute for Art History, Museology and Conservation, the INTAC, for whom she has also done the first ever full-fledged documentation of Jain-Neubauer, the famed stepwell of the Queen of Patan, recently declared as the World Heritage Site by UNESCO. She is currently a Alexander von Humboldt Research Fellow affiliated with JNU in New Delhi. We're very delighted to have you, ma'am. Over to you.
Yeah, good evening. Again, I'll start from the beginning. I'm very happy, Chandni, to be here today and share my experiences and my engagement with water and water architecture and the stepwells and I'm thankful to you for inviting me here to talk to you today and all the members of the Karwaan Heritage. My first field work was in Gujarat, as Janti already mentioned. During my studies of Indian art history, I was intrigued that most of the academic writing on Indian art concentrated on the history and architecture of temples, mosques, palaces, and what is called high and classical architecture. But I felt that equally important are the expressions of the common people, of civic architecture, and the structures of everyday life. So I embarked on exploring the monuments connected with water, traveling all over Gujarat and other parts of Western and Central India, visiting and documenting wells, stepwells, and other water-related monuments. This study resulted in my book, The Stepwells of Gujarat, the first ever monograph on the subject, which deals with the architectural typologies, hydrotechnical knowledge, the iconographies of sculptures found in water structures, which is something very specific, the chronology and the histories and cultural siting of these unique monuments. The water structures that I will be talking about in a moment from now, often hydrotechnological and artistic marvels, representing the deep-rooted ancient knowledge of water harvesting and distributing systems, do not only fulfill the basic need for domestic and agrarian supplies of water and the cultural sensibilities of the people, but these are also sites for recreation and social engagement, as well as for apotropaic redemption and salvation. In many belief systems of the world, especially, however, in India, water has this intrinsic power and strength. The magnificent and ingeniously conceived structures encasing water have always been an integral part of mainstream Indian architecture. The diversity of their design, the architectural figurations, the interplay of canonical and local idioms, the specific iconographic, aesthetic, and ritual characteristics, their location in the regional religious and economic order, as well as the enormous, age-old eco-hydrological knowledge, make them important cultural constituents with immense art historical significance. Since the inception of architectural thinking in India, water has been negotiated, designed, and curated, and in the process activated and transformed into man-made spatial ecosystems. When water is thus molded by the people, it merges with their artistic, social, and religious traditions, and it is not anymore just a natural resource. This aesthetic language of water is an intrinsic part of the cultural expression of a community, of a region, or of beliefs and religious practices. Or to say it in other words, water histories are written in a social space, managed by the people in a participatory way in the micro, socio-historical, and sacred territory. In addition to these factors, they are as much markers for economic wealth and a healthy commerce, thus creating a holistic interconnection between urban space, trade and mobility, history and culture, as well as religious beliefs and the environment. Just a word on the enormous structural difference between wells and ghats. Man-made reservoirs like wells, stepwells, and ponds enclose water which is still and motionless. Unlike the riverside ghats, which act as an embankment and are built to withstand the forceful dynamics of the flowing water. Stepwells and ponds are carved out from the deep within the earth and being open to the sky, occupy the liminal space between heaven and earth, between the underground and the human existence above. And contrary to this, temples and such structures are built up in the clear and open space, rising brick by brick, stone by stone, from the ground into the sky, while reversely, water monuments are subterranean structures, in a way inverted, as these are excavated or carved out from the deep earth. Therefore, the architectural frame for accumulating, preserving, and regulating water had to be done with perfect geological and hydrological expertise, especially for the fortification of the side walls to prevent the caving in due to the pressure of the side walls of the underground earth. Now, let me not hold you up more, and let's just proceed and talk about the first ever water structures that are found in India. I don't think I have to talk too much about Mohenjo-daro, that is quite known. It's the Great Bath. It's on the right side here, you can see this, which is quite an ancient monument, and everybody knows, all archaeological people know that during Harappan times, people had a vast knowledge about water, how to harvest, how to contain water, and the water drainage system is quite knowledgeable in Harappan, in the Harappan architecture. And the earliest stepwells, as you can see here, or ponds, are connected with monasteries, which are rock-cut monasteries. And therefore, I mean, these kind of stepwells are cut into the rocks up to the groundwater level, or harvesting the rainwater. This is in Nagar Jonikonda, about 3rd century CE, means before Christ. And other such wells and stepwells are found also all over Gujarat, in the monasteries and around the Gir forest or Junagadh. And here this, I only wanted to just show that those monks who were living in the monasteries had genius ideas how to harvest even the water, the last drop of water, because living on the top of the hill in these kind of rock-cut cells, you need water. So the water from the backside of the cell is being dripped and harvested here, and then collected in a pond. Here we have a rock-cut stepwell, which is quite a known stepwell in Gujarat. It is Ari Karwaan. It is also rock-cut into the earth and goes down quite deep, as one can see here, with steps. And these are the rocks there where the water is found here. This is also near a monastery. And as I mentioned, water is always deified in India. And I'm just jumping a little bit across. One could talk so much more about these kind of iconographies. In early Gupta period, the river Ganga as well as river Yamuna is made into anthropomorphic female figures. One can see the river goddess Ganga here standing on the Makara, and Yamuna standing on the tortoise. And already in Vedic times, the rivers were personified and deified as goddesses. But I'll just move further, coming now down to the stepwells. Just a few minutes to talk about the typology of the stepwells. I'll explain in the later slides a little bit more about this, that we have the linear plan, L-shaped plan, or cross-shaped stepwells, circumambuli and stepwells, and with a spiral plan. What is common basically in all the stepwells is also, like the term says, step well. This is a well having steps to go down into the earth. As you can see here, it has a descending passage depending on the groundwater level on the aquifer of the area in that where the stepwell is to be built. It has 2 stories, 4 stories, sometimes even 7, 12 stories in the bigger kind of monuments. At the end, there is the well, which is here. Normally, there is a very ingenious system in the architecture of water monuments in India, that the water in the well is only accessible from the top by a pulley system where one can throw a bucket down and pull up the water by bucket and then use it for domestic or agricultural usage. And this water, because here there is a wall, remains untouched by human touch. That means it remains hygienically clean, whereas often there's a small pond here in front, so that water is pollutable. People can sit there, wash there, and even water the animals in a caravan situation also. Let us continue. This is the most important stepwell and the most monumental stepwell and the best preserved stepwell in Gujarat. As Chandni already mentioned, it is now a World Heritage Site, having about 7 stories deep. It is called Stepwell of the Queen or Jain-Neubauer. It was built by Queen Udayamati in the city of Patan in northern Gujarat, which was the capital of the Chalukya kingdom. When shortly after this stepwell was finished, was built, there were big floods, and this stepwell carved in. That means for 700 years, this stepwell was buried in mud and water and dirt and earth. So when I did my studies in the late 70s, I just saw a kind of a big ditch. One knew that there was something. There were a couple of niches and a couple of pillars, and the steps were here, but one didn't know that such a magnificent monument was underground, because it was just covered by earth and water and so on. And after my book came out, an archaeological survey embarked on excavating this wonderful monument. And as you can see now, it is in full bloom, and people can walk and see this. The side walls can see we will talk about the sculptures in a minute. So coming to the various types of stepwell, and I must say this is one of my favorite stepwells, which is called Vikiavau in Gumli, somewhere in Saurashtra. When one walks through the landscape, one doesn't see anything except a couple of small pavilions somewhere in the distance. Like this is the entrance pavilion, and then there is the next pavilion, and then another one up to the big ditch, which is the well. Interestingly, this stepwell has only these are the intermediate constructions which are necessary architecturally and structurally to hold against the thrust of the side walls, because the deeper you go, the more strength and heavy load is there, which is very difficult to hold against, so that the stepwell doesn't carve in. This area here in Gumli is rather rocky. So therefore, the architects that time, they did not have to build many of these constructions, intermediate constructions, but the distance from one to the other is sometimes more than 17 or 20 meters. because the side walls would not carve in because they are quite rocky. Coming to the next type, this is a stepwell near Ahmedabad, Jain-Neubauer in Adalaj, which has a sandy and very brittle kind of geological surrounding, and therefore structurally one needs to have many more of these kind of intermediate constructions, these kind of pavilion construction, even intermediate just kind of pillars inserted into the distance. So the distance from one such construction to the next one is sometimes only 1 or 2 meters, 2-3 meters, because otherwise the side walls would carve in. And I was talking about the hygienic ideas of the people that time, that the water in the well remains untouched by people and hygienically clean. But here, under this kind of structure, there's a small pond which is accessible, and the water from the well can flow into this pond, so people can sit around, wash, take bath, or what are the animals, but this dirty water cannot flow back. Only water from the well can flow here. There are certain valve systems here in underground. Another method another structural method to bar against this thrust of the side wall is to have a tapering or narrowing plan and elevation, as one can see here in Angkor Mata Nivau. That means the stepwell is quite broad in the beginning. The descending passage is very broad. And then the deeper you go, the next story, the descending passage becomes narrower and narrower. And at the end, it's only just a kind of a small passage. Next one, you can see here, the illustration to this. This is a stepwell in Delhi, where you can see the tapering plan and section, so that on top the stepwell, the descending passage is quite broad, but the deeper you go, the narrower it becomes. Also here in Rajouri, also in Delhi. Then we have the L-shaped stepwell, which is, I think, quite a rare kind of structure of stepwells. One can find them occasionally in Gujarat. That means if you have a less space to reach the groundwater level, if it is quite deep, you need a certain distance. But if you don't have a big plot and only a certain kind of plot, like for example this much, and not a very long plot, the architects developed the system of having a knee here and a 90-degree turn, so that you go down one step here and then take a turn and then go further up to the groundwater level. This is, there are two examples like this. So the descending passage goes down and then takes a turn to the left or to the right, like here. And often, as I mentioned briefly earlier, the stepwells are also sacred spaces, sacred sites, and often there is a small temple next to the stepwell or at the entrance to the stepwell, sometimes also inside a stepwell, but we'll talk about these kind of ideas later. This is a stepwell which is mentioned also in many of the Shilpa Shastra texts, that is a Chaturmukha Vapi, as it is mentioned in the Sanskrit text, or Chaumukha Vau, which is not too much found in Gujarat, but one can see it here. It was a little bit in a dilapidated condition when I visited it. So there are 4 kind of entrances in the 4 directions, and the well would be here in the center. One can see here when it had water. This is more like a pond, like a step pond, rather than a step well as such, but it has these kind of step passages, so they would go as step wells also. Then coming to the little bit to chronology, like the earliest step well, as I mentioned in the first slide, were cut into the rock, and they were already there in the centuries before Christ. But the earliest structural step well is found also in Gujarat, in the area of Dhak, which is about 5th, 6th century, around the Gupta period. But in later centuries, around 10, 11th, 12th centuries, one finds stepwells that have a circumambulatory passage around the well. So you have the descending passage here, and this is the well, but all around the well, there is a passage and chambers where people can sit and take rest. One can see here, this is the section. I feel that this has been developed under Islamic influence. Maybe the idea of hammam also was a kind of a initiative or an inspiration for this. There are more such stepwells in Gujarat and Western India as such. This is one such well. For example, there are the chambers around the well. This is in Tuklukabad in Delhi, and at the palace of Feroz Shah Tughlaq, there is obviously, sorry, that all the palaces, the palace complexes, they need water for the inhabitants. So many of the palace complexes have many wells or step wells, also the fort of Tuklukabad, for example. And one can see here Brahmariya Ko in Ahmedabad, where all around the well there are chambers. And what is not much known is that at the Taj Mahal, on the platform of the Taj Mahal, there's also a huge kind of structure made in sandstone, like in the same kind of architecture and style as the entrance buildings at the Taj complex. But this is a water structure. One can see from outside that it is absolutely in the same kind of sandstone structure with marble inlay work and balconies and perforated screens. And here, even today, people can have water. Those of the pilgrims who come there to the Taj Mahal, they get water. And this is the well inside, where there are again chambers around and people can sit and spend time. First of all, it is a very comfortable space. First of all, it is open to the sky, it is airy, and secondly, it is underground, so it is naturally cool, and thirdly, it has water around. So these are the areas that people really enjoy to spend time with. And this is one of the latest stepwell, probably built in 1935 in the palace of Wankaner. And when I went there to document this stepwell, that time person from the royal family, that time prince, was telling that his ancestors, his grandfather who built this stepwell, was using it in the summer month as their habitat. They would move, let's say in May, in June, when it was very hot in Gujarat. It's an arid area. Water is anyway very scarce there. But so they would move into this stepwell, which is here. One can see this is the second story underground. One has water here. There are passages around. This is the step going down from top, from the ground level. And all around there are rooms and very comfortable places. And the people lived there for a couple of months. It was airy because it was open here to the sky, and small balconies jut into the water. The well is here, the water is here. One could sit nicely in this kind of arched balconies looking into the water, and there's a sculpture of Shivji, and Ganga would flow out of it and make the area much more cool than otherwise it would be. Yeah, again, the stepwell having spiral staircases, up access to the water, even the last drop, so one could come down at these circular steps to go into where the well is. Or this is in Asarpuri Nivau in Ahmedabad, where the kind of small pond, as I mentioned, it just in front of the well would be behind this wall, and this is the area. Unfortunately, now many of the stepwells are dry because of too much of drawing out water with the industries, with industrialization. Too many of the stepwells in Gujarat now are dry, But earlier you can imagine that when people could sit all around here, there would be water. One could go down up to the water, put the feet inside, wash themselves or wash dishes. And animals also could be brought down here to have them drink. A very specific kind of well or stepwell is found in the arid area of Rajasthan in Shekhawati, which is a very interesting cultural enclave, so to say. And it was an area where all the Marwaris come from, who then later on worked for the British East India Company or the British Crown. And so this is the area where I would say the first type of modernity came. The people who worked for the British people used to come, who lived in Calcutta, used to come back to Shekhawati, to Rajasthan, and build palatial homes. One can see here, they are were wonderfully decorated with wall paintings. One can see here the wall painting of a stepwell, and oxen would draw water around. The interesting part is that these are the stepwells that are covered. You can see here in this schematic design that this is the well here underground. The water is being pulled up by the buckets by a pulley system, and having the small turrets is also very important for the caravans who were walking from the port cities of Gujarat, let's say Surat, Bharuch, or Diu, who were walking from the port cities when the trade would come, the maritime trade, to bring the goods up to the imperial city of Delhi and Agra, for example. And the caravans would normally travel at night, and during the day they would spend time at a stepwell like this. And seeing these turrets, the caravans already would know from very far away that, oh, now we will approach a kind of a place where we would have water for the animals and for the people. You can see here the turrets. That is quite a distinct kind of feature of these kind of stepwells in Shekhawati area. And all around there are small pavilions for people to spend time, because normally caravans, especially in the summer month, they would travel at night, and during the day they would spend at such a place where they have enough water for themselves and for the people. Now coming back to the structural parts of a stepwell, first of all, there is the well. Secondly, the descending passage, and thirdly, in the intermediate structures. The well, one can see here, this is in Patan Rani Ki Vav, where, as I said, it is the most beautiful stepwell, and because it was covered 700 years by water and mud and not disturbed by any human being, it was not destroyed. So all of the sculptures that are found here, except those that are, just fallen down, but are in really spectacular condition. And as I talked about the iconography of sculptures in a stepwell, they are mostly connected with water. One can see here Vishnu Shisha Shine. This is the main image in a well. And the Shilpa Shastra text, which is quite interesting, talk about the well part in a stepwell being as if the Garbhagriha in a temple. So this is the most sacred space in a stepwell. And people, even today, one can see here small, the garland, even today, people go and worship the kind of images in stepwells, showing, being a witness that this part of the stepwell is considered the most sacred part of. And here it's another small kind of stepwell in northern Gujarat in Sathamba, where one can also see that the well part, you can see the kind of roundness of here of this wall. This is the backside wall of the well, which is carved with small kind of figures. As I mentioned, that some of the stepwells are reflecting the kind of local idioms. We can see here, this looks like very much like the local sculptures would have done, dancing figures or elephant figures. And this, of course, is the main goddess in the center of the well, which is being worshipped. Then the descending passage in Adalat, in the Adalat Stepwell, or in Dadahariya Stepwell in Ahmedabad. Very interesting here is that Rudabai Stepwell was built in 1499, and Dadahariya Stepwell also was built in 1499. Both stepwells are of more or less the same kind of structure, the same kind of dimensions, the same kind of architectural dimensions, but Rudabai Stepwell was built under, so to say, Hindu patronage, and Dadahariya Vow was built by the main lady of the harem of Sultan Mahmud Begra. But as one can compare the inscription in both the stepwells, where most the builders, the actual construction people, were often Hindus, and in both the stepwells they were rather similar. And actually, distance-wise, they are hardly 20 kilometers away from each other. And the descending passage, as I would call it, is just light is the theme. I mean, people that time when they were building this stepwell, they were very well aware that the sun, the course of the sun is changing the light in a stepwell. That means in the morning, the sun would be rising and bringing the sun rays into the descending passage, and one would walk down here kind of in a meditative kind of walk down, slowly, step by step, down to the water level. So it is, people were rather conscious about the play of light and shadow in these kind of stepwells. The kind of sensitivity that people had, I just wanted to highlight here with this kind of slide. Then steps are of two kinds. One is, of course, just the kind of parallel steps. One can go down, like one can go down here, step by step. But to reach a very deep kind of level, you need a lot of distance. If you just have only these kind of parallel steps, which are only 10 centimeters high, so one had to invent a kind of lateral block system of kind of pyramidal steps, so that in a short distance you can reach a slightly higher depth. And this is a system that is not only used in stepwells, but also in ponds. And this is in Jain-Neubauer. You can see here that from one kind of platform to the other, these lateral steps are being used, so that from this kind of level to go down to this level, you only need, for example, a distance of 20 centimeters or so, because you have these lateral steps. A stepwell in Rajasthan, in Abaneri, where this kind of system of steps, of lateral steps, is used up to the best optimum, I must say. And also here, I think the people were very well aware of the play of light and shadow, so that when you go, this is a stepwell which is about 13 stories high. I mean, it's a huge kind of structure. It's one of the best and most interesting structures in Rajasthan. You walk down slowly these steps, and then at the lowest depth, there is a small kind of pond where people could sit. And here there are niches, and here there are niches where people could worship. These are an image where I just wanted to show the kind of play of light and shadow around these steps. These are the intermediate constructions, as I mentioned, that to bar against the thrust of the side walls. Like, imagine when you go down up to this level on the 4th or 5th story underground, the the strength has to be so much of the side wall that the earth would not pressurize and would not fall for break down the kind of structures. So therefore one had to build these kind of pavilion constructions, as I call it. In Sanskrit it would be called kutas, and these are the platforms where people also can spend time. This is cool. In these kind of areas people could sit and relax or meditate on water, or meditate on the goddess that are having its sacred image at the end of the well. As I said, the sculptures in a stepwell, and this is in Rani Ki Vav, as you can see that even the smile on the face is so well preserved. This is a Sura Sundari just playing with a kind of a monkey who is trying to pull her Odni away, or kind of here a figure of Varaha, where Bhudevi is sitting on his arm and trying to caress his snout. I mean, these kind of sculptures are so well preserved because they were covered for 700-800 years. You can see here the image of Kalki, and there are about 500-700 sculptures. I mean, none of the temples of Gujarat have such good preservation of sculptures anywhere. But as I mentioned, that being a water monument, it reflects the mainstream architecture, as would be, for example, the temple in Modera, which is more or less built during the same period. So the stepwell reflects also the kind of mainstream architecture that is found in temple architecture. So coming to the other structural part of a stepwell, the descending passage has at the end this kind of small basin. I have been mentioning it a number of times, where there are galleries all around. Again, people could sit around here, and the well would be behind this wall. The water could flow into this small pond, and people could sit around here. And this is a stepwell, that area stepwell, which is about 6-7 stories high, but it's open to the sky and therefore airy. And here underground, it would be very, very cool, and one could really spend the summer months very nicely. This is the Dahari stepwell, this is Surabai stepwell, and this is actually a stepwell in Delhi, Agrasen Ki Bauli, where again you have the kind of pond here where from this valve system, water can flow here into it. It's a little bit in a dilapidated condition, but this was a pond. Or here kind of Rudabai stepwell, where there is little bit water after rainy season, one can, and this is the well here at the back. Yeah, now leaving now the whole structural and architectural part of a stepwell. Now coming back to the religious aspect, and this is a very strange and very interesting phenomenon in a stepwell. This is Mata Bhavani Nivao. As I mentioned earlier briefly, that the stepwells are often commissioned by women, and stepwells are a feminine space, because water is connected with creativity, with birth, and with creation. So most of the stepwells are dedicated to one or the other aspects of the mother goddess. Let's say this is, for example, Mata Bhavani Nivao, there is Sindh by Mata Nivao, Angkol Mata Nivao, Asapuri Nivao. That means always a kind of mother goddess is placed, has its space in a stepwell. And when I did my first study, this stepwell was just a nondescript kind of a very small kind of stepwell. There was a small niche at the ground, at the lowest level, where an image of the goddess would be there. Some pujari was sitting there sometimes, but it all was, sometimes women would come there and do some worship. But nowadays, over the last 30 years, this stepwell has become like a temple to the goddess. It has regular worships, it has regular sessions for the pujari to call people and to call women. Women can now go around here, and it is like a very big kind of temple of the goddess nowadays. And now I'm coming to the difference again being like the Islamic influence and Hindu influence. Chandni asked me in the beginning if there are any kind of examples. So here I just wanted to mention something very interesting, and that is Ruda by Nivau means it is actually a stepwell built under Hindu patronage, because there was a small kind of Hindu kingdom outside Ahmedabad. Although Sultan Mahmud Begra at this time, 1499, was a very powerful sultan of the Gujarat Sultanate, and being a very powerful ruler, the small kind of Hindu kingdom which was outside Ahmedabad, they did not want to offend the religious sentiments of the Islamic ruler, and therefore they did not put the goddess and the sculptures in their anthropomorphic form, but only in their symbolic form. That means one could have put a sculpture, for example, of Kali or Durga in her anthropomorphic form, as we had seen, for example, in Rani Nivau. But because the Sultan Mahmud Begra was ruling very nearby, so the patron of this stepwell did not want to have an anthropomorphic figure, but more kind of a symbolic figure, so which is the line for the goddess, which is her vehicle, and the trishul and the eyes. And other niches have, for example, just the 9 pots. That means the Nava Durga concept would be just represented by a small, I don't have a slide here, but it would be represented by just a sculpture being consisted of 3 rows of 3 pots, means the Nava Durga kind of concept. So this just besides. Then, as I mentioned, that many stepwells are kind of religious places and have a temple nearby. The temple the stepwell of Abaneri, which I had shown you, the stepwell, which is very deep in Rajasthan, has a goddess temple just nearby outside, and you can see here the image of the goddess is being worshipped even today. This is a very interesting kind of structure. One has to, I think, do a little bit more research into why such a structure would be made. There are, of course, no kind of images like many of the stepwells in other parts of India don't have so much of sculptural ornamentation, not as much as in Gujarat or Rajasthan, but it's quite an interesting kind of structure in the form of a yoni. Then, as I mentioned, that water is also very important and basically a part of the architecture of temples. In that sense, is that this is Mukteshwar temple. Normally people just go and see the temple as such, but this kind of pond, which is just behind behind the temple, is very much, it's an integral part of this kind of temple, because people normally have to go, before they go into the temple, they have to go to the pond, wash themselves. You can see that people were really here and stepping down onto the water and washing themselves and washing their feet, washing their hands. And then once they are cleansed, they are allowed to enter the temple. So as the old Upanishad text would say, in places without tanks, gods are not present. This is the motto for that. And kind of the tanks and stepwells or water bodies are also kind of an idea to democratize the kind of Hindu worship, in the sense is that the main idol in a temple, as for example, specifically in Puri, the Jagannath Puri temple, people who are kind of outsiders or lower caste, they are not allowed to go inside. But once in a year, the main idol is taken out in a procession, and that is what the whole Jagannath Ratha Yatra is also all about. But before the Yatra Ratha takes place, the image, you can see here the Trinity of Jagannath, Subhadra and Balabhadra, are taken out in a boat which is on a tank and circumambulating this kind of structure, main structure in a tank, which is very near to the Puri temple. So this kind of lake, Narendra Sarovar, is very much a part of Puri Jagannath temple, because once in a year, the idol is taken out and taken to this water body. One can see here the boats. The idol is then placed on the boats and then taken around in the on the tank. So people who are of so to say lower kind of strata are allowed and to see, have darshan of the image and worship it while the idol is being taken on a boat ride or being brought to the tank. Yeah, as I said, water is also a sacred space, and idols are being immersed. This is just a kind of a drawing which is showing, like in 19th century, the image of Ganesh. I think even today Ganesh Utsav is being celebrated all over India and all kind of water places where the image of Ganesh is immersed into the water, and this is a depiction of 19th century. And just to end this kind of quick journey into water monuments and the stepwell, that this is again from the same book, is that the water is a kind of a sacred space where a small kind of baby that has died would be placed into the water and being put into the sacred space of the water to throw, and people are sad and sitting here in sadness at the death of the baby. And water is also a place for pleasure. I don't want to go more into this. I think everybody knows this kind of iconography of Krishna playing his flute and sitting on a tree, and Chir Haran, so to say. And this is an old print of the 19th century. So with this, I would like to just end. I'm sorry if I was a little bit quick, because I think we lost a bit time in the beginning. I'm sorry for that my computer conked off for whatever reason, but I'm glad that we finally could see all the slides and have a quick journey through the stepwells. And now we can open, the space for question and answer.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Jain, for this very, very insightful talk on the various Baolis that we have around in the landscape of India. And owing to the, like you said, owing to the time crunch, we're very mindful that we've reached the top of the hour. We have about 7 to 8 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. So please either use the raise hand feature to ask your questions or comments to Dr. Jain, or you can also use the chat box to put your questions in, and I'll read those to ma'am. Please, the floor is open for Q&A. Ma'am, could you, if possible, could you take the slideshow down so you'd be able to see all of it?
Okay, but how do I do this now?
Yes, ma'am.
Stop share, no?
Yes, ma'am. That's
yeah. Is it now gone? No.
Yes, ma'am, it's gone.
It's gone. Okay.
Thank you. Geeta ji, please go ahead with your question.
Just a curious question. Is this phenomenon only this stepwell phenomenon very common only in western northwestern part, or do you see any of these other than Nagarjunakonda anywhere in the south or east part of the
So there are many stepwells also basically all over India. And especially also Madhya Pradesh has many stepwells. Even Orissa has some, and in the south also there are stepwells. I think there is a little bit of difference, as I said, that the idiomatic usage is different. That in Gujarat, obviously they would reflect the kind of architecture and the mainstream architecture of Gujarat, and in Rajasthan it would be similar, or in Madhya Pradesh it would be similar. Also in the south, there are many stepwells also in the south. The one I showed you with the yoni shape, and there are others also, but often they do not have this kind of sculptural ornamentation. Often they are just kind of structures interesting structures from the architectural point of view, but not too much of having, maybe there are some sculptures just at the entrance or at the entrance pavilion, but not so much of sculpture ornamentation. But stepwells are found all over in various kind of structures. Even in Himachal or so, there are certain types of stepwells, although there is much more water, so they are not anymore how to say, so deep, but there are also stepwells in all over India.
Thank
So
you,
my
ma'am.
question was actually because of water shortage is why the stepwells actually got developed, because in the south there is quite a bit of tirtha next to a temple, but never a
Yeah.
stepwell. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. There are tanks often, or the temple tanks or so. But also in the, in the Deccan, which is quite dry or so, no? There are also many stepwells there.
Thank you, Geeta ji. This seems to be the doubt that the entire house had, ma'am, that the fact that stepwells are found, why are they only found mostly in the western part of the India? But you've already told us that we do find various kinds of stepwells throughout the country. I had a question of my own, ma'am, and
Yeah.
it was with regard to the utility of the stepwells. So
Yeah.
were these stepwells open only to the elite, or was this open to everybody, and was caste system followed when it came to the accessibility of such?
Yeah, exactly. This is a very, very interesting subject, and you have really, touched upon the core of the stepwells. There are many types in that sense. For example, in Shekhawati, stepwells are often found in the compound of a big estate. That means these are stepwells that is only used for that kind of family, for the extended family. There are stepwells that are related to the community, where a certain kind of community has a stepwell, and only the part of the community, like a kind of a guild, is allowed to enter the stepwells or use the stepwell. And often the lower part, which is a kind of a paradox, because actually the lower communities, like their kind of people, or in Gujarat, they carved the stepwells, they built the stepwells. They carved the stepwell out. They know exactly where water is found, where one can build a stepwell so that the stepwell also would have water. They are the knowledgeable people who know where to build a stepwell. But since they are of lower caste, they are not allowed to use that stepwell, but they have their own stepwells, often on the periphery of the city, outside the city, or the village or urban space. So, this is it's a very difficult part, and I think one should really do more research in this, because, for example, stepwells which are built along the caravan routes, obviously, since that are open to the general public, that means they don't have these restrictions that whoever brings a caravan is allowed to enter the stepwell, use the water, spend some time in a stepwell. So these are just common, and many inscriptions also mention that. And we didn't have so much space, but stepwells are also a sign for a healthy commerce, because the traders, they also knew that if they want to have a proper trading system and a trading mobility system, they have to commission stepwells and caravanserais, for that matter, along the trade routes. And these are then built for the common public. People can use it. But these are along the trade route, so to say. But otherwise, the access is rather restricted, but one would have to do more research in these, and there's no common answer to this, because some stepwells are for common usage, some stepwells are restricted, and some stepwells are only for the people of the estate, or for example, in a royal palace. Obviously, then the stepwell is only being used for the family and the aristocrats who live in that kind of complex. But it's a very good question, and it's really the core question for a stepwell.
Thank you, ma'am. We have reached the top of the hour. Do we? Okay. Yeah, please go ahead, Tanmay. Yanji, please.
Yeah, thank you, by the way, for an excellent lecture. That was really fun also to sit in. I wanted to take Geeta ji's question and go one level deeper. if you allow. Um, uh, from what I understand, from what you taught us today about Stepwells being an example of civic architecture,
Yeah.
civic architecture of this kind and this scale and this beauty and splendor would require, to my mind, two factors to come together. One would be necessity, which is what we discussed when you were answering Geetaji's question, which is that the necessity for things
Yeah.
like Stepwells
Yeah.
exists all across India. The second thing would be the ability, the whether you actually can build something like that.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
that's the thing that I want to ask you about, because I think that there were other um, dynasties and other political powers that had the ability to do those things. For
Yeah.
example, the Chandelas that were sort of contemporaneous with some of the temples that you had talked about, who,
Yeah.
if you see the temples of Khajuraho, they clearly have the ability and the
Yeah.
resources to build something as grand as the Rani Ki Vav.
Yeah.
I want to know if you have any thoughts on why they did not.
They did not in other parts of India, you mean?
Yeah,
By
or maybe they did and we just don't know about it.
yeah, I mean, there are also very monumental water monuments in other parts of India. For example, I know somebody in Telangana, an architect who has documented about 200, 300, or 400 stepwells in Telangana itself. And they are also huge kind of monuments and huge kind of structures. Sometimes they look a little bit more like a pond, like a step pond rather than a stepwell in a Gujarati sense. But there are huge structural monuments also all over Gujarat, and I believe in in Hyderabad also. So that means, I mean, the royal families or the aristocrats of that areas, they also built these kind of huge kind of structures. That is known. And I do believe that now all over India, people are now getting aware that stepwells are found or water monuments are found all over India. And there are so many kind of groups and even architect groups or even the government is part of it to document and to preserve these kind of stepwells, because they also say that I recently met somebody from the Ministry of Water Resources, the Jal Shakti Ministry, and they say that we want to restore these stepwells because they are there. It was built. That means so much energy, so much time, so much money went into building a stepwell, carving a stepwell, and it had water in earlier times. So why not use these kind of resources and dig them out again, clean them up again? Even if the water level has sunk, one can put in a motor and draw out water from below. But at least one can have a kind of a common space for people in a village or in a town where people can, like, for example, I showed you the Agarsen Ki Baoli in Delhi. It is used nowadays because it's very well preserved. It's a common space for young couple to sit together in a niche, having their own privacy. It is a lovely space. You can go down the steps. It is a beautiful surrounding. It's open to the sky, and it's a very nice kind of space to use it for entertainment or something like this. So I think people are nowadays also aware to use these kind of monuments or stepwells again.
Tanmay, any follow-up?
No, that answers my question. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Anamika ji has a question, and we know that, ma'am, we've taken a lot of your time. So Anamika ji's question would be the last question that we take. Everybody else, please email your question, message your questions to me in the WhatsApp group, and I'll email those questions to ma'am.
Yeah,
after the
I can.
call.
Thank you,
Anamika.
thank you, ma'am. Am I audible, Chandni?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. That was a fabulous lecture. Thank you so much. I am hearing you from Kolkata, and yeah, and we are about to witness the Visarjan of Durga Puja day after tomorrow. So water and use of water. I am yet to come across any staple structure in my city yet. Do you know about any staple structure in Eastern India?
Oh, that's a good question, but that is true. I also have not heard about stepwells in Bengal or so, because I suppose it is a very watery area, or is it not? That water is everywhere. So maybe one doesn't have to go so deep as in the area, in an arid area like in Gujarat. You have to go deep into the earth to get a little bit, a bucket full of water. Whereas I believe that in Bengal, and there are small rivulets and
Absolutely.
marshy
Ponds
area,
also, yes.
ponds
And
are there, so they are full of water even in summer months. So I believe that is one reason why there might not be too many stepwells or not at all any stepwells in.
there are arid regions also, but I am yet to hear about any staple. It is also a
Yeah.
possibility that
Yeah.
because probably they are made of brick, because there is no
Yeah.
rock cut structure,
Yeah.
they might not be there.
Yeah.
So I also remembered that there are ghats with a little circumambulatory
Yeah.
areas where people can spend like lovely time and all. So
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
consider them as the civic architecture.
Yeah.
I have a one very small follow-up question.
Yeah.
While your link was being restored, I was looking at all different staples in Ahmedabad, near
Yeah.
Ahmedabad and Baroda, because I'll be traveling to Baroda. So there is a staple called Kweli Bhav. Are you aware of it in
Wait,
Baroda?
what
It's
is-
called Koeli Bhav. I can send you the link which I have unearthed. It
Yeah.
apparently is still in use.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Send me the link, because I mean many basically every village or every small town has hundreds of stepwells, and
okay.
if the water is clean and if people keep it also keep the stepwell clean, people do use it. I mean, even in Delhi there is one stepwell called Gandaki Bauli. There people, in summer the boys, they use it as a swimming pool, so to say. They jump from top and into the pond, and when in rainy season. So I mean, some of the stepwells that are still clean
Uh,
are in use. Yeah, that can
this
happen.
one apparently gets used for all kinds of things. So I'm planning to visit that
Yeah,
because this comes as a follow-up of Chandni's question, because it seems to be used by all sorts of people from different strata of the society.
yeah, yeah.
So
I
I'm
mean,
very curious about it. And just because you just told me, I remember Jodhpur, there is Tulji Ka Jhalra,
yeah,
which has
yeah,
been restored, and the boys jump in the water exactly
yeah,
like that.
exactly. It's called an often jumping well.
Yes. Thank you so much. Those were my comments, statements.
Thank
Once I go to Baroda and take some photos, I'll
Yeah,
probably
mail me
get back on that.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. I guess I think 10th of November
Yeah.
is the date I'll be visiting. So
Okay.
thank you so much.
Thank you, Namika ji. And with that, we must close the Q&A session. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Dr. Jutta Jain-Neubauer for her lecture, for her time, and for answering all our questions in such detail. This is the book that I'll share the link to this. This has ma'am's essay, Characteristics of a Stepwell, which was my introduction to the brilliant work that ma'am's doing. Ma'am's a water historian. So I'll share the link to this in the group. And you are, of course, please also look up other essays and books that ma'am has written on the Baulis or those stepwells that we have. In fact, ma'am says that on the first page itself, ma'am says that they should be called a staircase well. And then she goes on to describe why is it a staircase well and not a step well. So thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. We look forward to hosting you again.
Yeah. Thank you, all of you, for listening so carefully and attentively. I was very happy.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.